All right, everyone, welcome back to Course of Action. My guest today is a former Special Missions Aviator who's flown high-stake missions for over a decade in the Air Force. He's also the author of a memoir called Moonchild. We're going to get into that, but first I need you to go like, follow, and subscribe right here on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Of course, visit jeffclarkofficial.com and also check out my Substack because I'm doing some really, really cool stuff on Substack to include some additional notes from these interviews that you're not going to hear on the interview. You got to go over and check that out. So go to Substack and type in JC Author. You'll see my face. You'll see my logo. Make sure you subscribe. It's totally free right now. And we're going to be hanging out and doing some really cool stuff. But right now, let's bring on Anthony. Anthony, how's it going, man?
Hey, pretty good. Yourself, Jeff?
I'm good, dude. Thanks for carving out some time and doing this. I'm looking forward to talking about the book, hearing about your time in service. And of course, what I always like to do when I have a veteran on is talk about the transition because we never know who we're reaching and who we might be helping by just having open and honest conversations. So we'll have fun today, man. But thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm glad to be here, man.
So let's start off with this first. For people who do not know, what is a special missions aviator and how did you get into it?
Yeah, so Special Missions Aviators, what the Air Force did was back when it was old aero gunner career for the 1 Alpha 7 AFSC, and I
Okay.
retrained out of the fire department actually in 2010. And so what was then aero gunner, flew in the AC-130 gunship. And then at 2012, 2013-ish, approximately, the Air Force, what they did was make a Swiss Army knife in the sky, if you will. And what they did was combine the loadmaster, the flight engineer, and the aero gunner into make it into one job. So you have that one guy doing all three tasks. Yeah, Pave Hawk helicopter. You can do CV-22s as well, and I think there's one more. The UH-1 platform as well. So
Yeah, because they're getting rid of the UH-1s, aren't they?
that's what I heard. Yeah, I heard they're getting replaced by a 60 actually. So
Yeah, I think I saw an article on that yesterday that said one of the Japan bases is getting rid of their last handful of them, and the Hueys are going to be kind of a thing of the past.
yeah, it's a such a tried and true since Vietnam. Sort of, it's an icon, if you will, for especially for helicopter gunners. So
Yeah. So why did you said you cross trained from fire?
I did. Yeah. So I'll back it up to basically my when I first joined the Air Force. It was July of 2000. I mean, this is before 9/11. I get the typical talk from Dad. Like, hey, you're a senior now. It's time to get a job, go to college, or get out. And
Yeah.
I talked to a Navy and Army recruiter, didn't work out. And my dad was in the Air Force before. He just did like 4 years down at McDill as a comm guy. Then he was well out before, but he, basically told me quality of life for the Air Force and the family aspect of it. And then I joined, did weapons loader for approximately 5 years. My first base was at Seymour Johnson. And then, 9/11 happened. And then, I saw what the firefighters did that day, and, they ran in, everybody ran out. And, it's sort of like, man, like I want to do something noble. Like I want to, I'm sort of getting started as far as doing what in my mind was noble or what mattered. And then, so I retrained in the fire department, 2005 aircraft, fire and rescue, went to Charleston Air Force Base, 5 years there. And then I get to it's in the book there, but a point, a fork in the road. I'm at a home on leave at a pizza place with some friends, and I look out and see the same cracks in the road is what I call it. And what I'm getting at is I realized I was sitting on the sideline with War on Terror, and then at that point, I decided to join an aero gunner. Got to fly on the mighty AC-130 H model gunship in the 16th SOS, and then never looked back to that point, man. So
So how did you handle it when the career field kind of changed from aerial gunner to special missions aviator, and what was that transition like?
So on the gunship, the gunship aspect for me was a lot easier than when I did it on the helicopters, because I was already an aero gunner on the H model Spectre gunship, and so I had to learn loadmaster stuff at that point. So you
Okay.
already had sort of a basic systems knowledge, things
Yeah.
like that, what systems run the ramp and door, for example, stuff like that. And but when I went to helicopters, man, like I had to this is about 2015. I had to forget everything I thought I knew about flying and start over. Because if you look at a helicopter, like man, how does this thing even lift? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I had to learn all basically the systems inside and out as a flight engineer and an aero gunner. You're performing all these different tasks, and I would say on the even on the Pave Hawk helicopter, man, like gunnery was probably 10% of that job. You're also deploying fast rope, doing hoists, calculating weight, weight and balance, and takeoff and landing data, stuff like that. So it's a lot going on. It's a perfect job for somebody who's OCD, or
Yeah.
you know like to multitask, I guess.
Yeah. My son is actually a special operations avionics guy down at Moody
Nice.
on helicopters, and he's absolutely loving it working with the
Oh yeah,
pararescue guys. Um,
yeah, yeah. That was honestly one of the funnest units, man. Was the 41st Rescue Squadron out there, and the history of the Jolly Greens, and it's one of those jobs I realize now, like you don't ever want to have to do, but if if someone's working, they're having their last or possibly worst day, so. But at the same time, you want to be that guy when their back's against the wall, the number's called. You want to be the guy to go, So
yeah. So let's talk about something I think people maybe get a little confused or misconstrued about special operations. It's that they train a lot, but they're not necessarily doing the job, and it's a job that they don't necessarily want to have to do. So the biggest part of the job is training, but I think a lot of people kind of wonder, like, what do they do all day if there's no, what do the Navy SEALs do all day when there's no big special missions to go do? They're training. What is a typical day for that, like in your part of the world, of that world, on a daily basis?
yeah, yeah. As an aviator, especially in the 16th Special Operations Squadron, I think it's always good to differentiate. Like like I realize, at a point, like I can never like physically be like an operator, right? So the water aspect of it alone, that's the great equalizer, right? So I was like, what I can do is make sure those guys get home, and so on a gunship, you're every time you take off, 3 to 5 times a week during a work week, for training, you're going to, like, for example, you're going to Melrose Range. You're doing sometimes live calls for fire with a joint terminal air controller, like a combat controller on the ground, or they could be a JTAC from another service. Usually the good thing about what I loved about gunships was you're supporting those unconventional forces, your SEALs, your Green Berets, your Ranger. But yeah, you're constantly doing live calls for fire. You're constantly learning your tactics, techniques, procedures, and then you learn to sort of operate like not everything's black and white, and especially when you get downrange, there's always this gray area where special operations where we sort of live in, and at the end, the decision comes down to, like, is it safe or unsafe,
Yeah. Not
things like
actually
that.
flipping open the AFIs and going, well, the AFI
Yeah,
says this, we
yeah,
can't do that.
yeah, because a lot of times there's no time for, like, to get in that sort of the weeds of the technical orders and stuff like that. But we have a saying, like, we on the rounds, but the guys on the ground they on the rounds, we on the switches. Meaning, like, if you get in like a danger close shoot scenario, man, like, you really got to, like, triple check everything and make sure you're not gonna accidentally hit the good guys. So
Yeah. I imagine that is a different level of stress, knowing that your comrades, your partners, your brothers and sisters are on the ground. You've got their back. You're their eyes in the sky, but you got to be careful where you step,
oh yeah,
because your job is to protect them, not to put them in harm's way. But sometimes it gets a little hairy.
oh yeah, yeah, and there's situations where you get the whole crews, the pilot from the aircraft commander back to the gunners. He's asking for inputs, and so everybody has a say, especially a situation like that. But it's very fast, and there is those split second decisions, where, like, you see a guy's got an RPG, aimed at the that SEAL team, they're pinned down. Like, you get rounds out as quick, but as safe as you can,
Yeah.
and knowing your distances, stuff like that. So
What is communication like? Because you're at such a distance, and of course we have great technology nowadays. Um, but split second decisions have to be made, and split second actions could change things. How important is communication when you're up there trying to do just that, have their back?
okay, communication, that's everybody's lifeline at that point, man. It's I guess organized chaos is the best way to sort of describe these. You can always hear, like, because to me there was always two types of gunship missions. There's the ones that you planned, you've prepped, you've briefed, and then there's the ones where, like, back in the day they used to give us a pager and certain numbers meant certain things, and you'd get alerted, if you will, and, like, there was a troops in contact situation, and at that point, man, it's literally you got a call sign for the guys on the ground, and you have a grid where you're going and a frequency, and then you're going, man, and, like, that was some of my, honestly, my looking back at them, some of my favorite missions. But there's that communication between the JTAC and the crew when we get about, a few miles out, and we'll start picking them up on sensors, and they start running like bees at that point, and they know at that point it's over, right? And but that communication piece is 100% everyone's lifeline. Everyone on the same page. So
Yeah, so I'm assuming you did a lot of QRF type of stuff.
yeah, like we would do like a lot of if there was like a direct action type thing going on the ground, something like that, we were the insurance in the air. I look at it like that, and then a lot of infill escort, and as well as the exfil, and if there's any type of like I said, DA type stuff, man, like we're overhead, and that's a lot of times like guys will run out the back of a building when they're about to get rolled up, and depending on the situation, you'll shoot. Sometimes you won't, so.
So tell me about something I read in your bio. You flew on the Jolly Green Mission of the Year. What is that?
Yeah, so the Jolly Green Rescue Mission of the Year is it's an Air Force award that basically the team, I guess the mission that had the most, I guess, prestigious rescue mission, and it was this is at this point in my career, I was on the H-860 Payhawk helicopter we sort of talked about earlier at Moody, and then it's basically there was a casevac in East Africa, say that June 8th, 2018, and everything's calm for a whole week, and then the last day of that week, all hell breaks loose, and we end up I say, like, we saw the best side of combat search and rescue that day, meaning we saved 5 lives, and the worst side, which meaning an American, once he got back on the operating table, perished. So yeah, that sticks with you, and that's like I said, part of that life. You never want to have to do that job, so I get that now.
Yeah, I'm sure it's one of those things where it's hard to accept an award for something like that.
100%. Yeah.
You did your job, but you didn't. Do you feel like maybe there's a little part of you that didn't do it like all the way or good enough? Like, how do you kind of live with the accolades, but also knowing kind of what happened?
Yeah. It's man, I struggled with it for years, to be honest with you. I ended up getting help for this exact scenario, but I've come to realize the fact that, like, in the mind's like, okay, if I'd have been there a minute earlier, 3 minutes earlier, and then come to find out all this stuff after the fact that at that point he would have passed anyway. We found out, because he took basically a direct with a mortar. But yeah, that does stick with you. However you want to look at that, survival is guilt, and it is hard to accept something for that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we did everything we could. I'm content with that, and I'm at peace with that. So
yeah. What do you miss the most out of being in the Air Force and going on missions?
I just miss the brother and sisterhood, man. I mean, what's unique about, especially on the gunship, man, is you got all these men and women, multiple crew positions, all working together for the same exact goal. All the bias, everything goes out the window. It's all of us on the same team, man. And like, there is a lot of pranks downrange that happen, sort of like a rite of passage. And there's always laughter, man. And there's always, in those moments you struggle with someone. So you always had that network, that support,
Yeah.
That was literally like in a room adjacent to yours. So
yeah, I think that's what I probably missed the most too. I still work for the Air Force as a civilian, but
Gotcha.
it's not the same. It's not the same as being in uniform. You can relate to people you work with.
Oh yeah.
It's not quite the same, and I think that's probably the most thing that I miss. We used to play pranks too all the time, and our favorite prank was, I worked in medical, so I worked in medical supply, so I was in the warehouse. We were always loading cargo and going out to the flight line and stuff like that, and our favorite prank to do on new guys was to say, hey, you need to go find us 1,000 feet of flight line. And
I've heard about that. Yeah.
We send them down to the dental clinic because it sounds like a legit thing. I go talk to the doc down there and get us 1,000 feet of flight line, and we'd always send a new guy down there.
yeah, man, it was like that, and then there was like having someone go look for K9P or something like that. And it's coming from the fire department, especially. I was already, I don't know, had a good arsenal at that point of pranks, I guess you'd say.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
And then once I became an aero gunner, man, I guess we fine tuned those, So, yeah.
Let's talk about your fire days a little bit. That's a pretty unique job as it is, because that's a job that you have to do, but you hope that you kind of don't want to ever have to do because it means somebody's in danger. There's a fire, there's a medical emergency. How did that time working in fire kind of prepare you for being an aerial gunner and working those special missions?
Yeah, I would say that probably the best shape of my life was when I was a firefighter. So I had that going into it. I was a little older when I retrained. I'd been in the Air Force 10 years going into gunner at that point. But it kept me in shape, man. And it's the rescue, I guess, mentality side of things. Like hey, like I signed up for this. This is someone's worst day. Like I'm gonna be there, do whatever I can. So that mentality, and it gave me an understanding of like if you're not safe, it doesn't matter what you do. If you get hurt or someone else gets hurt, you know what I mean. So there's always you always have to see the big picture, because there's times where you can get tunnel visions in a fire, even like where there's things going on around you, where if you don't have the situational awareness, that'll kill you first, type thing. So
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, again, you're probably doing a lot of training, but there's also a lot of downtime when there's no emergencies. How
oh
do
yeah,
you utilize your time? How do you stay focused so that you don't get that tunnel vision, so that when you're ready to go, you're really ready to go? Um, because I know I've got to talk to a couple fire guys too, and that is one of their biggest concerns is
oh yeah,
we're glad there's no fires. We're glad there's no emergencies because that means everybody's being safe and nothing's going on. But just because we only have one once a month or one every other month doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be sharp. So it's staying alert and ready, in shape, and ready to
yeah,
go and they're always practicing their medical stuff. I mean, I know that's big, especially in the field that
oh
you
yeah.
went into. It's got to be a huge thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it's a good point. I mean, the good thing about I guess the DoD fire departments is like everything on base is so fire safe, and sort of what you were saying earlier. Like I think I saw maybe three good structure fires, and the whole time I did that job, but and not even a real aircraft fire, but thank God. But yeah, there is a lot of training, and like when I remember how it was sort of different days throughout the week. Because we would do back then 24 on, 24 off, and then every two weeks you get what you call a Kelly day. That'd be your 3 days off in a row. So every day you were on, there was usually a drill in the morning. We called it like a drill, like a structured drill, or there would be like a live fire, where they control the aircraft, the mock fire, if you will, with a propane. You put that out, and you're always training, and you're always getting that critical feedback, and that's another thing I would say it helped me with is like you're going to make mistakes, and like the biggest thing is to put them behind you and move on, and they just want to see you get back up because at the end of the day, in these sort of jobs, you're getting trusted with someone else's best friend's life, man, and that's an awesome responsibility, and it gets scary sometimes, but it's something you definitely want to have to take on.
Let's jump forward into the book Moonchild. When did you decide you were going to write a book? And what kind of drive did you have to do that?
Yeah, so I was it was my last year in the Air Force, man. You know, I'll paint the picture. My last deployment to Iraq, man, where I went back to Gunships at this point. It's my sunset tour and my 20th year, man, and it was so slow. I felt like my whole why and my sense of purpose, I could see it fading.
Mm.
Like I knew when I was get back, I was going to hit the button 100% because my whole reason for being, our whole reason is to make sure those guys on the ground get to go home and see their family. That was over. I realized that was getting to the point where it was going to be over, especially when I hit the button. And then I end up basically, we talked about the Casevac and everything. I'd lost a lung. All this bad stuff was happening in my life, man. And I was drinking like what was a pint on the weekend turned into a pint of at least a day of some
Mm.
sort of liquor, just to go to sleep. And then, my wife gives me the ultimatum like, hey, like, us or the alcohol, her and my baby girl or the alcohol. And of course, I chose my family. And I went to the SOCOM. It was a psychiatrist and called basically there's this thing called an MFLAC, and it's part of the preservation of the force and family. A lot of these units have these things. As a matter of fact, your son probably has that out at Moody. But yeah, basically I'd end up seeing it. I do prolonged exposure because I didn't want to take medicine. And so like what you do is you write down your story over and over and over. You get comfortable saying it. And the idea of it is to be comfortable, comfortable being uncomfortable to the point where sort of like we're doing now. My biggest fear in the world is talking to someone, like a
Yeah.
lot of people, but is to get to that point where you can say it, you can verbalize it, you can get through the conversation, and be at peace with it. And so she's like, the first time I told her the story, like I cried, heck, she cried, the psychiatrist, and she's like, you should tell your story. Must have told me 100 times, man. Like, And then when I got out, I said no, and of course when I got out, I'm like, man, when this dust settles, like there's not even a door handle on the other side of the door at NPF when you're out process, right? Like maybe someone could benefit this for that whole sense of purpose or why, like, like the, hey, this thing goes on, what we did mattered, right? And
Yeah.
basically, if one person gets help from reading the book, then that's a blessing, that's a win. So,
I think one of the biggest challenges, since I've retired and I've seen other people get out and retire, is, and you said it perfectly, there's no doorknob on the other side of that door. Um, there's nobody who calls you. Nobody checks in with you. Once you're done, you're out of the military, you're kind of gone. The military moves on. Your unit moves on.
right,
Your commanders, they all move on. And the mission keeps going, and new people come in, and that's just kind of how it is. But the thing that's difficult, I think, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, is that you have to just suddenly let it go. But
exactly. Yep.
and the military just lets you go, but the purpose of being there is still there. So how do you cut that off so quickly and move on is a very, very difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people to do. And I think people underestimate how hard it's really going to be, especially when you've been in for a good period of time. I mean, maybe your first enlistment's not too bad if you just do one enlistment. It might still be a little rough. By no means am I saying it's going to be easy, but it's not easy to just walk away from that, and especially after you've done a lot of time like you have, and I did quite a bit of time too. You're used to a way of life. I was in the military for most, if not all, of my professional adult life. That's way more than it was my childhood. That's what I knew the most, and it's very, very difficult to just walk away from that because, again, nobody's calling you 60 days later and going, hey, how you doing? Because it's not that you don't matter, but you don't work for them anymore, so they're not going to call. Like most employers are not going
Right.
to do that once you leave their business. They're not going to call you 2 months down the road and go, hey, how you doing? You don't work for them anymore, and
Exactly. Yeah.
that's tough. That's a tough
Oh
thing to
yeah.
do. How did you transition? Was it really difficult? Did you have a kind of an idea of what you were doing? What were your struggles?
Yeah, so I was basically I get to a point, man, where I had to like I don't know how else to say it, but I had to get over myself, right? Like I had to recognize the fact that, like you said, this isn't my job anymore. Like this is someone else's now, and there is not that constant daily communication with the same, bros and bras you used to fly with, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like what I did was I decided every veteran, every veteran has a story, right? And like you have a podcast, right, to as a platform to tell these stories, right? And my sort of platform, my outlet was like, bleeding it on the page, man, writing it. Like what I would do is like, cause I was struggling with this whole sense of purpose was like, every time I wanted to drink, man, and pick up a bottle, I picked up a pen and tried to make sense of, 2 decades of war and my why and my sense of purpose and just, this Charlotte's web of emotional words and throw it on paper and try to make it make sense. And hopefully somebody else can read it, one day. And like I said, it's I had to just basically get my story out there to feel better about it, at peace with it.
How therapeutic was writing for you when it came to kind of understanding yourself and understanding your past and kind of helping you move forward?
Oh, it was a phenomenal way to do it, man. Because what I learned to lean on as a crutch during the prolonged exposure was writing it out. Granted, that was a fraction of what my whole book's about, but like just getting it on paper, man, and like you'll think of words, man, like how you're really feeling, and like it doesn't hit you, like you don't come at peace with it till you write it on that page and you can see what your mind's thinking. It's like a window to the soul at that point.
Yeah.
And then once I got it out, man, I just felt better.
I think it's something that's very difficult for people to do, and you've already said it once, is talking,
Oh yeah.
especially when you're on active duty. There's resources there to go talk to people about, but there's always kind of that fear that it might get back to your command, and they might, or
Oh
your
yeah.
friends or whoever, and they might pass judgment, or they might pull you off the next mission, and um, those silent battles, that people have, and that you have to deal with, and that's trauma that I don't think people see. It starts when you're in uniform and it carries on when you're not. And I know for like me, I didn't really transition out of the military until like 5 years later because
Yeah.
I went from retiring to a full-time job, and then I had like a 1 month break, and then I went working back for the government again. So I had my convalescent leave,
Yeah.
to chill, grow my beard out, and do my thing before my ceremony.
Yeah.
But then I went right to work. DD 214 went right to work, and I didn't really ever have much of a break. So I never really became me. I was just kind of a continuation of me in different clothes. And 5 years later was when I realized that I was real short. I was angry, and I didn't know why. And it was
Right.
because I was still trying to be that person in uniform today. And it wasn't until I went and talked to someone, and I'm glad my wife mentioned it to me. She was like, you really need to talk to someone because you don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's wrong, but I know that you're struggling, and you got to find out why. And that was probably the thing that saved my life, saved my marriage, and saved a whole lot of things, because I went and talked to someone at the VA, and I had a fantastic VA counselor, by the way. People knock the VA all the time, but I'm telling you
Yeah.
a success story right here. I had a great counselor, and he was more of like an athletic one, because
Yeah.
I was talking to him about my injuries and how I'm a very hands-on guy. I feel like I can fix anything, but I can't do everything I used to do, because I can do something for like an hour and then my back is killing me for days, and
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do when you're young enough to do those things, but you're not physically able to do those things. So then you have to pay people to do them, and you watch money go out the door, or spending money on things that you can do yourself. Like,
Yeah.
people don't realize how hard of a thing that is to figure out. And I went and saw a VA counselor who specialized in getting people back physically and understanding the mental side of that. Man, that
Oh yeah.
changed my life. Just my way of thinking. Hey, you're giving up this time and this money to do this, but you're giving it back to your family. And it was just like the
Yeah.
way it was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I just thought of this too. Like, when you said that, I continued my help with the VA when I got out, and I, nothing but good things to say about the counselor I had as well, man. And she got it, man. And um, basically, like, I remember getting to a point where, like, to me, like, legacy matters. In the book there, I talk about that same moment at the pizza shop where I realized, man, like, you can't take anything with you. There's what's the saying? There's no U-Haul behind a hearse, man. Like, the only thing you can really do is leave behind, like, how you're viewed, what people think of you. How well, your memory, right? And that's pursuit of legacy, whatever you want to call it. But she's like, like, your legacy's changed now. What it should be is like your legacy for your family. What kind of dad are you? What kind of husband are you? What
Yeah.
kind of man are you? What kind of integrity do you? Stuff like that. That's my legacy now. So it's the same goal, but just altered paths.
Yeah. What would you tell to fellow veterans today about preparing to transition from military service?
I would tell them, like, first of all, most of us, like, we just got done with 2 decades of war not too long ago, man. I know it's a while back now, but it seems like it was yesterday. Half our adult lives over there, and it's okay not to be okay. And then I recommend, definitely, no matter how small or minute you may think that the issue is, seek help. Whether that's through a counselor, whether it's through your preacher, your priest, whoever your spiritual leader is. Just get these words out, man, one way, shape or form, and tell your story, man. Every veteran has a story, and you'll feel better when you tell the world about these stories. Because, like I said, like, if we don't, then these things die in the desert.
Yeah. I think something that I've always given people is go find the community. There's
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of veterans out there who have transitioned, who are working in the veteran space, who understand the VA process, the claims process, the mental health process. They know services for resumes, blah, 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 blah. Go find those people. Go to LinkedIn, go to Facebook, find those groups, and then just don't be ashamed to ask those questions,
Oh yeah.
because there's people transitioning every day. Everybody needs help. It's not
Yeah.
easy by any means. Like, I thought I had it all figured out, and I applied for a bunch of government jobs. I was perfectly qualified. I didn't get a call for any of them. I'm like, dude, I don't know what's going on. And I talked to one of my veteran buddies, and I was like, dude, I don't know what is wrong. He's like, send me your resume. I sent it to him, and he's like, "Oh, this thing is garbage. Here, you look at my resume and just do the same thing." And I was like, "What do you mean it's garbage?" He's like, "You'll never pass through the system. You're not doing the right thing to pass through the system. You got to do keywords. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to pass through the system. You're telling them what you want them to hear. You're not telling them what they need to hear." And once I learned that, and I learned the secrets, then I started getting calls and interviews and all that stuff. So it was like those little tidbits, like don't struggle. Go ask your friends. Go ask out there in the community, like, "Hey, I'm applying for this. What are some tips of the trade? What are some tricks? What do I need to know?" And then let people help you, because there's thousands of veterans out there that are totally willing to do that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a good point. I did there's this thing called the SOCOM Warrior Care Coalition, I believe. It basically, like, my last year there, I went and talked to this guy, and people that are in that world, like, there's guys that will literally, like, you give them your bullets, your EPRs, your performance reports, whatever other branches call them, and I remember there was a Green Beret retired up in Washington State, and he's like, "Yeah, just email your stuff to this guy," and I got to talk to that guy, man, not just about the resume, but just about life, man. Like, did he have so much insight? I remember talking to him. A lot of healing was done in that point too, and he's like, "Yeah, Dyer, some of your shit, and we'll get it." Basically got a brand new resume, ready to go at all times because of that guy. There is these programs, and you have to sort of seek them, and maybe America in general, man, maybe the media, whoever, needs to do a good job of getting all this stuff out, these resources, whatever the case may be. So,
yeah, I think finding those resources when you transition, regardless of what it is, even if it's just a phone call with a fellow vet to just chat, I think that's a resource that you will, like you just said, you wound up having a really good conversation with somebody who you didn't even know. That way of healing, and then you relate. I think the biggest problem with transitioning is that you feel lost and you feel like you're the only one out there, but you're not. So find the community and link up with them and ask them for help, because it'll be an absolute lifesaver, and it'll keep you from making bad decisions and going down
100%.
that dark hole where you don't need to go. We served our country. We got a lot of valuable things to still add to the country and to offer, and we're talented folks, and we just need to find a way of doing that. And I've said for years, I think the military does a very bad job of transitioning their veterans. They just do a very, very bad job of it. And I think there's a whole lot more that could be done, and Skill Bridge and things like that are starting to become more popular today, which I think is fantastic. But there's still that hard deadline and cutoff, and there's not as good of a warm handoff between active duty and the veteran services. And I would love to see the VA and the DoD do way more things where it was a way more smooth handoff, and they had a transition program where somebody did call you 60 days later and say, "Hey, bud, how you doing?" I know that's a lot of things to ask for, and there's a lot of veterans, but like, set up a program where guys like me and you could volunteer our time. I'd do it. I volunteer to make 5 phone calls a week to call random people and just say, "Hey, man, how are you doing?
Yeah,
What do you need help with?"
Yeah, and that's man, I've always said, like, there's a difference, like, like truly checking on someone. We talk about the 22 a day, right? We're like, "Hey, like, how's it going, man?" Versus like when someone you've had these moments and at war with, right? And you're like, "Hey, man, like how are you doing, really, man? Like, what's going on with this?" Like, where they did a social media post, whatever the case may be, and there's that difference that it means a lot more when you say it that way. It's how you say it, and it's actually with sincerity and caring. And as far as, like, I wish too there was a program where, like, you do taps, right, and then there's like, what, you can do it twice, I believe, in your career. And then there's this fire hose effect of interviews and resume writing, and that's a very small fraction of that, course. And then you get out, and you're like, you're flying blind, man. So I wish there was a way to, like, to CQ your progress, or whatever the case the VA may come up with. But I think there is in the future, hopefully, a way. So
yeah, and if anybody listening knows of a way, please drop a comment or put something on the episode post, because that would be great. Because I think that's one of the biggest things is calling and saying, "Hey, what do you need? Seriously, what do you need? Tell me what you need. Or do you have a job? Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Like, what do you need? You say it. Don't hold back. Tell me the truth. What do you really need? Because I'm here to help.
Yeah.
I'm not the government. I'm not some weirdo. I am your brother. We're veterans together. What do you need? And I'll help you figure it out. And like that authenticity, that being genuine, I think it would be huge and beneficial, man. Because I know everybody has their struggles, transitioning, and it's not easy. So we can do a lot to make it easier on ourselves, and we can still stick together.
Oh yeah, that's a perfect way to put it, man.
So what else is going on with you? What are you working on next? What do you have working on like right now?
Yeah, I'm starting a second book actually. What I really want to do, man, is I don't know how I'm gonna skin this cat yet, but like I want to develop like a hub. If you think about it, like a way for every veteran has a story for them to tell those stories and maybe get it published and edited for like free of charge. Like again, that would probably take a lot of lifting to get that off the ground, but I don't know how I'm gonna do that yet. But I'm throwing different ideas on the board to see what may or may not work right now. And as far as my day to day job, man, I'm doing the flight simulator stuff here at the Cannon Air Force Base. So it keeps me, it's somewhat in the game still, I guess you would say, not actually flying, but basically developing these scenarios, writing these scenarios to, my experiences, and hopefully the crews get something and benefit out of that, whether it's emergency procedures, tactical missions type scenarios and stuff like that. So I'm always trying to find a way, man, to pay it forward, and I guess in this case pay it backwards.
Yeah, I think an anthology of veteran stories is really really cool, really really cool. And if I can help with that in any way, please, you got my email.
Sure, I
Absolutely
appreciate that.
reach out to me, and maybe we can do like you do an anthology, and then we have people come on here and kind of talk about their story a little bit at a time in little 20-minute conversations or something like that, and use my platform to help spread the word. But I think that's really cool, dude.
Awesome, brother. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. I'll definitely take you up on that, man.
Yeah,
So,
please do.
will do.
Well, dude, where can they find more about you and follow along with you? Do you got social media, website?
Yeah. So I have there's Moonchild. It's the title of my book there, and there's a picture of me basically looking out a window with my NVG's on, and that's the Facebook page. And then there's Marco_Brolo21 is my Instagram handle. And then there's been a couple like Bold Journey that I think did an article, a couple things like that. And just as far as the book goes, you can find it wherever they sell books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online you can buy it. And it's Moonchild, the Roots and Wings of a U.S. Air Force Combat Special Missions Aviator.
So there you go, guys. Follow Anthony. Really awesome story, dude. Stay in touch with me if there's something I can do to help out with this mission going further. I'd love to use this platform if we have to. And it was awesome talking to you.
You too as well. It was a great one. Thank you.